You just got paid. You check your bank account and the number looks decent. Not amazing, but decent. You feel that little wave of relief like, okay, I'm good this month. So you pay rent, grab groceries, fill up the tank, maybe order food twice because you had a long week and you just didn't feel like cooking. You handle a few bills, toss a little toward that thing you've been meaning to pay off, and life just keeps moving. Then you blink, and it's 2.5 weeks later. You open your banking app almost by accident, and the number staring back at you makes your stomach drop. Not because you did anything reckless, not because you went on a trip or bought something expensive. You just lived your normal, regular life, and somehow you're nearly back to zero. That feeling right there, that quiet, slightly embarrassing confusion about where the money went, that's what we're talking about today. And I want you to know before we go any further, it's not because you're bad with money. It's not because you don't work hard enough. There's actually something specific happening under the surface that most people never get taught, and once you see it clearly, the whole picture starts to make a lot more sense. My name is Ben, and I spend way too much time thinking about why smart, hard-working people still can't seem to get ahead financially. If you're someone who earns a reasonable income, pays your bills more or less on time, but still ends every month wondering why your savings account looks exactly the same as it did 6 months ago, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps you out. Because today, we're going deep on something that affects a massive portion of working adults and almost nobody talks about honestly. We're going to look at the math, we're going to look at the psychology, and we're going to figure out why feeling broke has very little to do with how much you actually make. Here's the thing that throws people off right from the start. Most of us grew up believing that the solution to money problems is simply more money. Makes sense on the surface, right? If I'm running out every month, the obvious fix is to have more coming in. Get the raise, get the promotion, pick up the extra hours, and everything else falls into place. And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you income doesn't matter. Of course it does. But here's what most people don't realize. Earning more money on its own almost never solves the feeling of being broke. There's a 2023 survey from Bankrate that found nearly 57% of Americans couldn't cover an unexpected $1,000 expense from their savings alone. And here's the part that should stop you in your tracks. That number includes people earning $80,000, $90,000, even over $100,000 a year. These are not low-income households. These are people with real jobs, real careers, real paychecks, and they're still one car repair away from financial stress. So if income alone were the answer, that number wouldn't exist. There's a term for what's actually happening, and it's called lifestyle inflation. The moment your income goes up, your brain quietly gives you permission to spend more. You upgrade the apartment because you can finally afford something nicer. You eat out a little more because you've been working hard and you deserve it. You justify the slightly better car, the new phone, the streaming services, the gym membership. None of these feel like big decisions in the moment, but what ends up happening is your expenses silently expand to match your new income, and sometimes they expand past it. You earn more, you spend more, and the gap between what comes in and what goes out stays exactly the same. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Ben, but I'm pretty conscious about my spending. I don't go crazy when I get a raise. Fair enough. So let's actually run the numbers together, because this is where it gets really interesting. Let's say you bring home $4,500 a month after taxes. That's a pretty realistic take-home for someone earning somewhere around $65,000 to $70,000 a year. Now let's follow that money. Rent or mortgage, let's say $1,500, which is honestly on the lower end in most cities right now, but we'll be generous. Car payment, insurance, gas, that's easily $550 to $700 depending on where you live. Utilities, phone, internet, add another $220 to $280. Groceries, a realistic $380 to $450 for one person, more if you have a family. So at this point, you're already sitting at roughly $2,700 to $2,900 gone, and you haven't bought a single thing for fun yet. That leaves you somewhere between $1,600 and $1,800 for everything else, and that sounds workable until you remember what everything else actually means. It means the dentist appointment you've been putting off. It means the birthday dinner for your friend that you can't really skip. It means the car registration that comes once a year and always somehow catches you off guard. It means the work clothes you need, the medication copay, the school supplies, the anniversary gift, the flight home for the holidays. These things aren't surprises. They're completely predictable expenses that just don't show up every month. And because they don't show up every month, most people never build them into their budget. So every time one lands, it feels like a hit out of nowhere, and your savings take the damage. This is what I call the predictable, irregular expense trap. It's not the daily coffee. That whole stop buying lattes argument has been beaten to death, and it's honestly a little insulting. Cutting a $5 coffee isn't going to fix a structural gap in how your money flows. The real leak is the $400 car repair in March, the $600 dental bill in June, the $300 holiday travel in December. Add those up across a year, and you're looking at anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 in expenses that feel random but are actually completely foreseeable, and most people have $0 set aside for them. Here's where we need to slow down a little, because this part is important. Understanding the math is one thing, but if math alone could fix the problem, you'd have fixed it already. The reason people stay stuck isn't ignorance, it's psychology. There's a concept in behavioral economics called present bias. Basically, our brains are wired to care dramatically more about what's happening right now than what's coming in the future. A dollar today genuinely feels more valuable to us emotionally than $5 3 years from now, even when we logically know that's not true. This is why saving feels so hard. You're asking your brain to give up something real and immediate in exchange for something that feels abstract and distant, and your brain pushes back every single time. Think about it this way. Imagine I offered you $100 right now, or $120 in 30 days. Most people take the $100 today, but if I asked you whether you'd rather have $100 in 12 months or $120 in 13 months, suddenly the extra $20 feels worth the wait. The dollar amount is identical. The only thing that changed is how close it feels to right now. This is the same brain glitch that makes it easy to swipe the card today and deal with it later. It's the same reason we tell ourselves we'll start saving next month after this expense clears, once things settle down a little. Next month never comes, because next month always becomes right now eventually, and right now always has its own set of pressures. On top of that, there's something called mental accounting, the way we mentally categorize money in ways that don't always make financial sense. A lot of people, for example, are very disciplined about not touching their savings account, but they'll carry a credit card balance at 22% interest at the same time. Mathematically, that makes zero sense. The interest you're paying on that debt is almost certainly higher than anything your savings account is earning, but psychologically it feels different. The savings feel like security. The debt feels like a separate problem. The brain keeps them in separate boxes even when combining them would be the smarter move.
And I want to take a second here to reframe something, because I think the word broke gets used in a way that's a little misleading. There are two very different versions of this feeling, and most people are only dealing with one of them. The first version is cash flow broke. This is when your money is technically there, but it's all already spoken for. Your income comes in, and before you even have time to think about it, it's been allocated to fixed expenses, minimum payments, and the cost of daily life. You're not spending irresponsibly, you're just operating with almost no margin. This is the most common version, and it's fixable. The second version is wealth broke. This is when someone has reasonable income and manageable expenses, but they've never converted any of their income into actual assets. They make okay money, they spend okay money, and at the end of their working years, they have very little to show for it in terms of net worth. No investments, no real savings cushion, no passive income, just income in, expenses out for decades. This version is quieter and sneaks up on people slowly, and it's actually the more dangerous one long term. Here's what most people don't realize. You can be cash flow broke and wealth broke at the same time, and a lot of middle-income households are living exactly that reality. They're stretched thin month to month, and they haven't built any real financial foundation beneath them. The good news is that both of these problems have practical solutions, and neither one requires you to earn dramatically more money than you already do. Look, I'm going to be real with you here. The personal finance industry loves to keep things complicated because complicated stuff sells courses and products. But the actual framework for stopping the broke cycle is not that complicated. What it requires is intentionality. And that's a very different thing from being complicated. The first shift is moving from a leftover savings model to a pay-yourself-first model. Most people's financial approach goes like this. Income comes in, pay the bills, pay for life, and save whatever's left at the end of the month. The problem is that there's almost never anything left because expenses naturally expand to fill available space. The fix is to reverse the order. The moment your paycheck hits, a set amount moves to savings or investment before you pay a single other thing. Even if it's $100 a month when you're starting out, that's not the point. The point is training the system so that saving happens automatically, not as an afterthought. The second shift is building what I call a predictability fund. This is different from an emergency fund. An emergency fund is for the truly unexpected, job loss, serious medical issue, that kind of thing. A predictability fund is specifically for the irregular expenses you already know are coming. Think about every expense you've had in the last 12 months that felt like a hit. Write them down and add them up. Divide that total by 12. That monthly number is what you need to be setting aside consistently so those expenses stop derailing you. If you had $3,600 in irregular expenses last year, you need to be moving $300 a month into a separate account specifically for that. When the dentist bill comes, it's not a crisis anymore. It's already been handled. The third shift is about debt, and this one's a little uncomfortable for some people to hear. Carrying high-interest debt while also not investing is one of the most financially costly habits a person can have. If you have a credit card balance at 19% or 22% interest, every month that balance exists is costing you money in a very real, very mathematical way. A $4,000 credit card balance at 20% interest costs you roughly $800 a year in interest alone, and that's if the balance stays flat. Paying that off doesn't feel as exciting as investing, but the guaranteed 20% return you get by eliminating that debt beats almost anything available in the market. This is where it gets really interesting, and I want to spend a minute here because a lot of people in their 30s and 40s think they've waited too long to start investing. They haven't, but the longer this gets pushed, the more it actually matters. Here's a concrete example. Let's say two people both decide to invest $300 a month. Person A starts at 30, person B starts at 40. They both invest until they're 65, and they both get an average annual return of 7%, which is a reasonable long-term historical average for a diversified stock market index fund. Person A ends up with roughly $910,000. Person B ends up with roughly $379,000. Same monthly contribution, same rate of return. The only difference is 10 years of time. That 10-year gap costs person B about $530,000, not because they made bad investments, just because they started later. Now, you might be thinking, I don't have $300 a month to invest right now. And honestly, that's a fair point. But here's what I want you to consider. $300 a month is $10 a day. And I'm not going to tell you to cut your coffee because that's not the move. What I will say is that when you go through the exercise of actually tracking where your money goes for 30 days, not estimating, actually tracking, most people find $150 to $300 in spending they genuinely don't value and wouldn't miss. Not because they're wasteful people, but because a lot of spending happens on autopilot, and autopilot spending rarely reflects your actual priorities. Here's something that took me a long time to really absorb. Financial progress is not about restriction. It's not about punishing yourself for living like a monk or never enjoying your money. People who try to fix their finances purely through deprivation almost always burn out and go back to their old habits. That's not a willpower problem, that's just how human psychology works. The real shift is getting intentional about what your money is actually for. When you have a clear picture of what you're working towards, whether that's a home, a fund that lets you leave a job you hate, a retirement where you're not dependent on anyone, or just the basic security of knowing one unexpected expense can't sink you, spending decisions start to feel different. You're not saying no to things because you have to. You're saying no to things because you've decided something else matters more. That's a completely different emotional experience, and it's the one that actually sticks. The people who make real financial progress aren't the ones who earn the most or the ones who are the most disciplined in some rigid, joyless way. They're the ones who got honest about where they were, got clear about where they wanted to go, and started making small, consistent decisions that added up over time. That's it. That's the whole thing. So if you walked away from this video with nothing else, I want it to be this. Feeling broke is not a permanent state, and it is not a reflection of your worth or your intelligence. It's a sign that the system you're currently running, the habits, the defaults, the unexamined patterns, hasn't been designed to work in your favor yet. And the word yet matters, because this stuff is learnable. The math is learnable, the habits are buildable, the psychology, once you understand it, stops having quite as much power over you. Start with one thing, just one. Track your spending for 30 days, build that predictability fund, automate a savings transfer before your bills go out, pick one and do it consistently for 60 days. You're not trying to overhaul your entire financial life overnight. You're trying to prove to yourself that change is possible. And once you have that proof, even in a small way, the next step gets easier. If this video made you think differently about your financial situation, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below with where you're starting from. I read them. And subscribe if you want more of this, because we're just getting started.